Just an acknowledgement of country first. I acknowledge the traditional owners of the Macquarie University land, the Wallumattagal clan of the Darug Nation. We pay respects to the elders and knowledge holders who have shared and continue to share their wisdom and knowledge, nurturing and sustaining our environments, cultures, and education. So without further ado, I'd like to pass over to Sue to MC the panel and start by introducing our panelists. Thanks, Sue.
Thanks, Vicky. Welcome, everyone. We have 4 panellists today who are going to give an overview of their experiences, either with their own startups or their interactions with startups. So I'll start with, we have Janaki Ramachandran from Facilitrade as one of the panellists. Also here today is Nick Ebauman from Recharge Wellness, Aggie Reifman from Surge Ahead Frameworks, and Brad Devison, Falling Cats Consulting. So thank you, everyone, panellists, for joining. So I'll get started on some questions. So the first question, which I'd like to pose to the panellists, and maybe we'll start off with Aggie. If you could please introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about your experience with startups. And I'll ask the same question of all the panellists. So starting with Aggie.
I just got the end of that.
Oh, sorry. Aggie, would you like
to be a moment when my internet stalls. So, hi, everyone. My name's Aggie Reifman.
Aggie, I think we're having a few issues. Maybe I'll come back to you and we'll start off with Brad.
Can you hear me?
Yep. Anyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. So my name is Brad Devison. Hi. A very short bio. So as you can probably see, I'm the oldest in the panel. So very fast forward on my background. I had an excellent misspent youth in bands and doing all sorts of crazy stuff. I finally got into programming and thought, wow, this is easy. I worked for a couple of companies and built up my skills. This is sort of in the mid 80s. So it was all crazy sort of times back then in terms of programming. And then one day, towards the end of those times, I thought, you know what, I'll just start my own company and how hard that could be. How hard can that be? And I did. We built custom software for people, and then we developed a system which is now called Expense8. If you want to Google that, Expense8. I started that, and then I exited that company in 2014. So a very whirlwind tour through that, which was very exciting times. Since 2014, I've been working with early stage startups. So I started off with University of Sydney and Murray, which was Telstra's accelerator. And since then, all sorts of stuff, people in Europe, people in New Zealand, just all over the place, and helping early stage startups, probably like some of you want to be. And so that's me basically. And I'm looking forward to, it says also what I want to do. I'll sneak that in now. I'm planning a trip to Spain. Yeah.
Yay. Hope that works out. Thanks so much, Brad. You've had a varied career for sure. Aggie, I might come back to you. Hopefully the connection's good. If you don't mind just introducing yourself and just a little bit about what you're working on at the moment.
Sure, I can hear you properly now, so hopefully you can hear me. So I started off with a degree in law and psychology at Macquarie University and sort of went down that path of corporate law. And realised it was not for me. Looked around, how do I get out of this? And through a number of turns, I ended up doing operations for a software development agency. And in my time there, I saw many startups come in and out the door, and I saw many startups fail, and I saw many tech builds fail. And I got really interested in why it was so hard to build technology and why it was so hard to get a business off the ground. So I spent a lot of time in that, eventually starting my own consulting agency, which really works with startups, but also with innovation and corporates and spinning out new companies from within existing companies. I've also done a lot of work for a number of accelerators, including Remarkable, which is a disability accelerator, and really, really love working with those early stage startups to get them off on the right foot. Currently, I'm actually working on setting up a company that has been charged with innovation across all of agriculture in Australia. So really looking at the very high level of how do we supercharge innovation across all the agricultural sectors of Australia, which is really exciting.
That is exciting. Thanks so much, Aggie. Nick, you're next. How about you just, if you could just give us a little bit of an overview of what you've been doing and working on at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I hope my internet is fine and that you all can hear me properly. I've had issues all morning in meetings, so I wanted to make sure it was perfect for this. A little bit about me. So I'm Nick. I'm one of the co-founders of a company called Recharge Wellness. And essentially what we do is that we're an online mental health service that's using digital health to be able to provide accessible mental health services to people all over Australia. Now, prior to that, you know, I've tried a lot of different businesses and a lot of different ideas within this space. Prior to that, you know, one of my passions is in fitness. So I thought a problem I could solve would be within that space. So we tried to create programs and different kind of software to be able to solve some problems within that space. And it worked well for a while. We were good at acquiring clients, but the problem that we found is that the solution that we had just wasn't good enough. So as a result of that, we found out that a lot of clients were exiting. We had a lot of churn within the business. And as a result, I just lost my passion for health and fitness, which I think a lot of startups find when they start a new idea, that sometimes comes from passion that they thought they were passionate about. And then they realize that they're no longer off the back of starting a business. So fast forward going through that process where that business wasn't working, I had an amazing opportunity to go on the Amazing Race, where I went on TV, travel across the world with one of my other co-founders, and a lot of TV opportunities there, which we were able to capitalize on. And then as a result of that, you know, me and my other co-founder, he's not here with us at the moment, we were just thinking about something else that we could do that aligned a little bit more. And to even give you guys some context, I actually practice as a mental health nurse. And mental health has always been one of my passions, but I was never able to think of a solution within the space because a lot of my experience is in inpatient care. So what we've done fast forward is that we realized that, you know, a constant problem that we're finding within our patients is that there's poor access, there's poor follow-up. No one seems to care is what they've been voicing to us. So being able to understand their pain, we came up with a solution, which I'll delve into a little bit as we go through this panel. But that's me in short, and we've been operating now for about 18 months within this space. So that's me.
Thanks, Nick. That's an amazing backstory. Really looking forward to hearing more about that. Janaki, I'll move on to you now. If you could just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your experience and what you're working on.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Janaki Ramachandran. I think, Nick, you and I should talk. I'm sort of in your space of patient care and NDIS, but how did I get there? Okay, so I'm a mixed bag of skills. I think, Brad, I might be much older than you. I don't look old, probably, but I won't challenge you on that. Anyway, so I started my career as a governance professional back home in Sri Lanka, where I worked as an assistant company secretary. So compliance, governance, rules, regulations, incorporation of companies, that kind of stuff. When I moved to Australia, I was told I was too young to be a company secretary in that profession. I didn't think I was, but it was not part of the legislation in Australia that a large company has to have a qualified company secretary. In little Sri Lanka and even in Britain, where I qualified, that was the case. So I was very, very disappointed, but that didn't stop me. I thought I'll get in as an administrator. So part of my course when I did it with the London Institute of Chartered Secretaries or Governance was administration and accounting. So I moved into general admin. A couple of years later, moved into accounting, hated accounting. And then I thought, what can I do to get out of this? That's when Macquarie came to my rescue. Did my MBA at Macquarie, and that helped me spread out into international marketing, strategy, and so on. And I got into the Australian Trade Commission. So that was the federal government. Great organization in the old days. This is going back 30 years. There you are. You can gauge my age now. So that was an organization run by a private sector board, but it was funded by the government. So I had an excellent mix of private knowledge running the organization, and I loved that combination, and I really thrived there. I spent 8.5 long years there, moved from division to division, ended up heading up market research, quality assurance and strategic development projects like performance measurement and so on. So soon after that, I realized my young teenagers were playing up in school, and the long hours and the 3 positions by then I was holding at Austrade was taking too much of my personal time, because it was a global organization across 63 countries. So any time of day you had to be available for people. Didn't work for me at that stage. So reluctantly walked out of Austrade with 2 days notice, wondering what am I going to do next? That's when I thought, okay, I better pull my skills together, by then varied skills, and set up my own consulting practice, but helping people get into exports. So I set up Facilitrade as an export-oriented assistance or consulting company. Years later, when the currency rates fluctuated and people were not into, it was not the flavor of the month, exports, then I thought, okay, I'll move into something else. And that's when I got out and worked for a lot of global companies like Aconex, American Express, and so on. And at the end of those contracts, I'm still working under my company as a management consultant. About 4 years ago, I thought the passion for me is to work with people. And I moved into the National Disability Insurance space, because somewhere in between I worked for the Department of, then they were called Aging, Disability and Home Care. So while working with them on policies and so on, we helped set up the NDIS, the National Disability Insurance Scheme. And I had a vested interest. So I was registered as a plan manager just to keep my finger on the pulse. I became passionately involved in trying to help people in the health and wellness area. So that's what I'm doing now. So my company moved into Facilitrade NDIS, again, bringing in all my skills. So I had set up companies to get into NDIS, register them, do the audits for them, which is a compliant audit, and do all their policy work and so on. In the meantime, 3 years ago or so, Macquarie Uni started Venture Cafe, and I've been very actively involved in Venture Cafe, which is for startups, which is a forum where lots of people who are involved in startups or voluntary assistance, like what we do, is provided all under the same roof. And there I met a few startups with whom I'm working. So one of them, I'll talk to you later about it, is a golfing aid product, which is very interesting. And in the meantime, I'm also working as a program manager. That's another hat I wear as a licensed program manager, working with the Department of Transport, New South Wales, Transport for New South Wales. So that's me.
Thank you so much, Janaki, and everyone. That's really interesting stories there, which I know we'll explore a bit further on. So I've got the next question I'll pose to Aggie and Brad. Starting off with Aggie, in your experience, how do startup founders identify their ideas, and any tips for identifying whether you're onto something that has real potential?
Yeah, look, that is such a great question, and I will keep it brief, but this is one of the things I could just go on and on about, because validation, making sure that you've actually got an idea that's worth pursuing, is so important and so often overlooked. People get really, really attached to their ideas. They're their babies, they love them, and they find it very hard to validate that idea and to potentially let go of that idea or pivot right at the very, very beginning if that idea is not going to work. So the biggest tip I could give you is learn how to do user interviews. Like, go out there, go on YouTube, you can watch a video on it and learn how to do proper user interviews. Set up proper processes where you actually ask the right questions. You don't ask people if they like your idea. You don't ask them what they would do in this situation. You learn how to interview someone so that you can deeply, deeply understand the problem you are solving. You need to focus on the problem, not on your idea. And when you learn how to focus on that problem and how to get people to speak to you about the problem, the idea will emerge out of that. You will know, you will hear what it is that people are trying to solve. It will start repeating itself, and you will understand that you're either onto something or you're not onto something. And then you move on to the next stage of validation, which might be making some sort of little prototype. It might be on a piece of paper. It might be a survey. It doesn't have to be fancy tech. Some other way of taking your concept from, I heard the right thing, to, okay, how can I test this in a little way to see if I'm still on the right track? And that idea of incrementally always testing what what you think you're doing with your audience is how you make sure you don't get, you know, a year down the track, have spent all your money and nobody wants what you've built.
That's great advice. Thanks, Aggie. Brad, would you like to speak to that? How, in your experience, how do startup founders identify their ideas, and any tips?
Absolutely. I just put something on the chat. There's a thing called the lean canvas. If you haven't looked at it, look at it. It's a really excellent framework for early ideation and putting things together. And it's basically customer and problem. And there's a bit for solution. No one cares about your solution. They care about who's your customer and what problem they have. So I'm just going to spit out a couple of things. Everything obvious has been seen. So I work with lots of universities, and there's ideas like, how can we get cheaper student meals? How can we help students find jobs and stuff? All of those ideas, worthy as they are, have been had. So what can you do as young people? Be curious. Just ask questions. What do you know what your mum and dad do? Do you know what your uncle does for a job? Hey, uncle, what do you do for a job? What's the most boring thing you do every day? Tell me about that. Practice on your relatives. So just be curious. A lot of people go through life, don't ask any questions, la, 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 la. Forget it. So try and be curious. Take on weird jobs or boring jobs. If someone at work says, hey, we're going to do the annual stock take, everyone's going, oh, put your hand up. Do it, because that's a boring job, and boring means automating, and boring means maybe there's a spark of a new idea in there. So be curious, do weird jobs. When you're talking to people, look for visceral responses. Look for the, oh, let me tell you about that time. That's brilliant. If they get the, whatever, that's not a good sign. So look for visceral responses. And last but not least, build expertise and value. So you're all doing degrees, great. You come out of that degree, not only with a degree with damn good marks, I hope, but also pick something to be an expert on. So as you're going through the degree, pick some weird thing that you're really interested in that's changing now, grab onto that, so that at the end of the degree, you've got a degree and you're the expert in whatever the heck it might be. So that's my brain dump there.
Wonderful, thanks, Brad. Look, the next question I'll pose to Nick and Janaki, starting off with you, Nick. How did you first identify your startup as an opportunity in the market, and what steps did you take to start your business?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think that I would lean on to Brad's point when he was talking about the lean canvas model, because that is what helped us really be able to brain dump and understand what it is that we're trying to solve. Because like Aggie was saying, we can get so caught up in the solution and just focus on the solution without really trying to understand what the problem is and what it is that we're actually trying to solve. And I think as you continue to grow within the business, sometimes you need to go back and revisit that canvas model, because you notice that you might start slightly pivoting as you start to grow and expand in your venture. But for us, the way that we were able to really understand that we had an opportunity in the market, I think comes from just the experience in working within the space that we're trying to create a solution in. So prior to me coming up with this idea, I spent 5 years in inpatient hospitals, speaking to my ideal customer audience, understanding what their deep-rooted problems were, what continues to happen, what their pains, how they felt, what they've tried as solutions, and really getting a really, really good idea about what's going on. But then once I was able to understand the problem, which is all well and good, I needed to be able to understand that there was a market for the problem that I was trying to solve. And I think that, you know, as entrepreneurs, startups, we sometimes forget to actually look at what the market is, because that's the only way that you're going to be able to determine whether your business is scalable or not, or there's even a market that you can serve with the business idea that you had. So once we were able to figure out the pains, which was quite easy to us being in the experience, and I would encourage for any students is that if there's an area in which you're interested in being able to disrupt the market or create a solution, similar to Brad's point, spend a lot of time becoming an expert within that space and really, really doing all the boring stuff that you don't want to do, but you need to do, because that experience is going to help you when you come into your idea. So once we did that, it was all about just making sure that the market, that we had a market for what it was that we're trying to solve. Did a lot of validation, run a lot of beta services to be able to understand whether this was feasible or not. And not only was it feasible, but would the people actually like the solution that we were offering? And once we were able to test that at a small scale, and then we realized we could put a lot more funding towards it. And then once we did so, this is how the business is, you know, coming to where it's at the moment. So I hope that answers the question. concisely. I tend to go on like a roller coaster sometimes, so I try to keep it as concise as possible.
Oh, good. That was really great. Thanks, Nick. Janaki, how did you first identify your startup idea as an opportunity in the market? I know you kind of gave a really great overview, but we'll just delve in a little bit further about the steps you also took to start your business.
Okay, so I'll talk about the current startup because I've been through the management consulting process, but then I focused. So National Disability Insurance, so that is working with the disability sector in Australia. While working for the various departments on the same kind of in the same sector and same kind of target audience or participants, they're called in NDIS, I found that their greatest frustration was understanding the rules, regulations, the standards, the quality standards, and the compliance side of things. It's a heavily regulated industry because it's people dealing with people. And the people they're servicing are people with disabilities. So there was another dimension which complicated this whole area, but it was therefore all the more important that they comply. So what I did was I just got into a few Facebook groups to find out what the kind of issues people are facing. Large companies didn't come into these groups, obviously, but that was not my target group. I wanted to help the smaller players and the medium-sized players who are struggling because they have few numbers in staff and they don't have all the time to deal with these changing regulations, the continuous compliance provisions, and so on. And they can be wrapped in the knuckles quite sharply and pay fines if they didn't comply. So my target group was then sort of determined. And then through these questions that I was trying to answer, I figured out where they needed assistance. So small to medium companies either wanting to set up in NDIS or already set up dealing with compliance issues, that became my target group. So like all the others have just been saying, it is a market-oriented approach. It's not a push product or service that I had in mind, which I wanted to push. Definitely, it catered to all my passions and I could bring in the skills. There's no point looking at the market need to put something out there if you don't have the skills. So I did the matching concept. I thought, okay, I'm in governance. I've worked in the industry. I love working with people. I want to be in this field of health. So the passion, the multiple skills, and the market need determined how I get into this current business.
That's great. Thanks, Janaki. Okay, so the next questions I'll pose to Aggie and Brad. What options are there for funding for a startup? Starting with you, Aggie. Aggie, I'm not sure if you can hear. Can you hear me? Oh. Okay, maybe I'll move on to Brad. Brad, what options are there for funding for a startup?
Sure. I'm not sure what happened to Aggie. So there's a whole bunch, but I suppose the first thing that comes to mind, and then many people, is investment. I'm mostly against that. I was bootstrapped from day one. We were profitable from day one for various reasons. So I'm not the right person to talk about investment at all. So let me talk about the other options though. You've either got time or money. So if you're a student, you've probably got some time but no money. So, and the other way around. So there's a concept called runway, which basically means you save up some money, which gives you enough, gives you enough time until you get to the runway. And of course, at the end of the runway, you either take off or fall down. So using your own funds is useful. However, a lot of the stuff, going back to the lean canvas and what everyone's pretty much said before, it doesn't cost you anything to talk to people. Literally, it doesn't cost you anything. It's like ringing up people and saying, hey, is this a problem? That initial idea searching, or problem searching, I should say, not idea, searching for a problem, does not cost anything. So if you have any ideas, spend your time on that, but also start building up a war chest in case you need, if you have an idea, you need some money. Better off your own money, you'll be much more careful with it if it's your own money. And yeah, that's probably all I've got to say. I'm sure the others can talk about investment.
Thanks so much, Brad. Aggie, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can.
Oh, great. Can you please give an overview of options, funding options for startups, if you can?
Yeah. Look, there are a number of options, but I think, like Brad said, there's really two big pathways: the funded pathway and the not funded pathway. And the people who tend to go down the funded pathway are people who've already made a connection or have some sort of large, like, family money behind them. And I would agree with Brad that it's not necessarily a better way to go. I know that the businesses that have taken the bootstrapping approach, they're much more invested and they will stick with it longer and they will solve those problems. I've worked with many funded startups that have gone absolutely nowhere, even though they had an absolute ton of money behind them. So money is not the thing that's going to make or break your business, especially at the early stage. In terms of bootstrapping it, doing it on your own, you know, there's saving, there's the family friends rounds where you get enough of a concept, you get people to believe in you and you borrow that money from people. There are a number of grants available, which are really interesting and good to look into as well, because they, again, will give you a little chunk of money that will get you from one stage to another. And they might also give you some exposure. In the same way, grants are available, accelerator programs, places like that, where they'll give you a little bit of money, but they'll also make connections and give you exposure. You'll meet other people will become aware of what you're doing. So there are ways of finding pieces of money that will help you along that bootstrapping journey. So I'd really recommend looking into grants and programs and groups that are doing the thing that you're trying to do in the space that you're working in.
Great, that's wonderful advice. Thank you so much. So the next question is, I will focus on how you secured enough capital to start your business. And Janaki, I'll start off with you.
Okay, so again, I spent my own money to set up. It was hardly anything. The registration and things, it cost less than $1,000 registering in the business, getting your, what do you call, business name registered, which is important. Becoming an ABN, for tax purposes, that doesn't cost you anything. So I set up all that, but developing my website was an important area where I had to spend my personal funds. But how I then continued was I planned very carefully what is the number of customers I would expect. What's my target group? What kind of charging profile can I come up with? What's there in the industry? How can I cut through the majority of competitors? There were fortunately very few small players in the India business helping the target customers that I was. So I had some unique advantages. So I pitched into that. So it was all about planning and then looking at estimating the amount of money that could come in so I could self-fund my business. It worked. But for the website, that's where I had to put the bulk money in. But that was my kind of business where you use your brain and most of your knowledge to provide the service. But if you have to develop products, like one of my startup clients I'm working with, he had a parallel stream of income. Himself, he funded it through another company of his. So his product is a golfing aid that you wear as a sleeve on your arm to keep your arm straight. It's called a straight shooter. So you can keep one arm straight and pitch it accordingly without both arms being sort of variables in the shooting action. So it was a product that he was passionate about, but he was also an occupational health and safety specialist, very highly regarded, award-winning guy as an individual. That was raking good money for him. So how he balanced the two, he struggled. He's a fairly older gentleman. That's where I jumped in. So I've been helping him for a year and a half now. We've just launched his website and the product is out there. The first lot are going to come out at the end of the month, the packaged product, but the product itself is available. So he succeeded with this philosophy of self-funding, but having a steady cash flow, having a cash cow, which was his other business. Where grants are concerned, like Aggie was saying, there are like the accelerated commercialization grant, but it demands a lot of time to apply and even put in a proposal to know whether you qualify. So you must have the time and knowledge and energy to do that. If you're going to pay someone to do it, that's not going to serve the purpose. So look for grants where you can, small grants run by councils. The RIDE Council offers a lot of grants for local businesses. I know of that. The mayor is quite sort of close to Venture Cafe and the startups who operate through there. So look in your local area first. But when you go through the grants, you put in your product and look according, you shortlist. I had something like 700 grants that are available. But when you look closer, it is either for flood mitigation or for fire or for animal welfare. So by the time you take all that out, there are very few grants. But you got to be very careful and selective in what's applicable to you. Have the conversation, talking, like someone said earlier today, doesn't cost money. Talk, find out, network. That's the other one. Network with your peers, your contacts, go through your contact lists. It could be old friends, uni friends, schoolmates who are elsewhere. LinkedIn is a great way to search for people, approach them whether they are willing to fund or whether they know of funding sources where you could dip in. So the Chamber of Commerce is another one where you could go for funding. They don't advertise too much, but you could try them, become a member. Sometimes it costs money, sometimes it's not much, very little or next to nothing. So go to the established institutions. If you're in New South Wales, the state government gives you a lot of assistance to get grants. If you're in an export-oriented business, Export Market Development Grant by Austrade is an excellent system. It used to be on a reimbursement basis, but now it is on a forward money provided plus reimbursement once you get off the ground. So that's something I can help people with voluntarily, free of charge. So contact me if you're in an export business, because I work with the grant scheme and I can tell you the details about that.
Thanks so much, Janaki. Nick, can you just provide a bit of an overview of how you secured capital to get started in your business?
Yeah, absolutely. So fortunately for us, we're an online business, which didn't require much upfront capital to be able to get started, which is, I think, the great thing with this day and age with online businesses. So everything that we did was self-funded on our own. And I think for a lot of the students here, they probably refer to, Gary Vaynerchuk, which talks all about, the grind and the hustle and like, you just got to make it work. And I think that a lot of students here, depending on your age, may be able to resonate with that, because that was my mindset going into starting the business. It was about, you use your money from 9 to 5, whatever it is that you do for work, and you use that to be able to fund the dream. And that's exactly what I was doing as I was starting my business. But the one thing that I used with all the money that I had, that I did accumulate for the business, was to not focus too much on, the product or what it was that I was trying to create, but it was more so about the skills and trying to learn how I can actually implement these skills to be able to make my business successful. So the first, chunk of money that I had was about, $20,000, which I invested in a business mentor to be able to teach me the skills over 12 months to be able to be successful within the online space. And I'm not saying that that's what you guys have to do for people that are listening, but I think one of the most important things is to be able to know, to have the skills to be able to run a business. One of the most important things is to know how to be able to market, how to be able to sell and acquire clients for what it is that you're doing. I think that a lot of businesses focus on, which not to say is not important, but at least at the early stages, they focus on more so of the nuances of their products and their service without actually knowing how to acquire clients. And obviously we need to do the market research. I'm not saying we skip the lean canvas model, but for me, it was more so once I was able to do that and establish a market, it was also about, okay, well, how do I acquire clients? How do I be able to fuel the business and fuel what I need so that I don't actually burn out and run out of cash, and that the dream can't, eventuate anymore because of all the time that I spent on doing this. So yeah, my focus was purely on skills. Skills never leave you. Skills, it might not work for this potential venture that you're doing at the moment, but it might serve you in another venture or another idea that you want, and you take that with you to the grave. So yeah, that was how I got started.
Great, thanks for that, Nick. I'll move on to a question a bit further on. So I'll pose this to all of the panelists. Aside from financial hurdles, what is the biggest challenge that you've had to date? Starting with you, Nick, if I can, and particularly what other common early issues have you observed?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sue. And I'm really trying to reflect on, because there's been a lot of big challenges that we faced as an early startup. I'm just trying to think of, I could say a whole list, but I'm trying to think of one that comes to mind at the moment that might be a bit more resonant with people. I think one of the biggest challenges that we had during the early stages was probably one of the biggest mistakes that we had, was not being able to understand how we had no financial management whatsoever. And I think that was the poor thing. that will slowly burn your business if you, and it doesn't need to be some complex model or some complex system, but just like simple allocation of understanding, okay, the money coming in is going to be allocated where, and how much do you want to leave at the end of it to ensure that you're still profitable or you still have enough capital to continue to grow and expand. And I think during the early stages, one of our biggest hurdles was more so when I was in the fitness industry and we were selling a service and we were acquiring a lot of clients, which was great, and we were getting paid up front. But the issue with that is, as I mentioned earlier, is that we were having a lot of churn. A lot of people were requesting refunds. A lot of people weren't happy with the service, and the money that were giving me, we weren't holding it for like a particular time to account for potential refunds that might occur, which is natural in any business. And we just spent all the money. So we're like, yeah, cool, we got that money. That's fantastic. Yeah, sure, our service will be good enough. They're not going to say anything. Let's just spend it. Da 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 da. You know, 3 weeks later down the track, people are like, oh, give me my money back. This is refund. This is not good enough. This is not what I expected. And we had no money to be able to honor those refunds. And I think that was one of the biggest challenges that we had as we started the business, because that slowly turned us from, you know, what we deemed was a profitable business to a business that was slowly going into liquidation because we had no money whatsoever to be able to honor these refunds. And, you know, as a result of that, we had to be able to, you know, ask friends, family members, dip into personal savings to be able to, you know, fulfill these requests. And that really turned me off business at the start, because I was like, you know, I had such a great idea, people wanted it, but, you know, the delivery model just wasn't good enough. And that was disheartening because you're like, oh, I thought I was doing a good job, but obviously I'm not. You know, the thing about business is that you can't have any emotions, you know, they'll just tell you the fact. And you start to take it personal, it's just more so to encourage you to be better. So I think that was probably one of the biggest challenges that I had, and one of the biggest learnings that I take with me in this new venture that I'm doing, is to be able to really prioritize cash flow and budgeting and allocation of where your funds are going.
Great, thanks for that, Nick. In the interest of time, I think we've only got about 15 more minutes before we wrap up and open up questions from the audience. But I'll ask Aggie if you could also comment on that. Aside from financial hurdles, what is the biggest challenge you've had to date, and what are the some of the common early issues you've observed?
Yeah, so look, I already mentioned that idea of just being married to your idea instead of the problem. So I'll move on from that, but you've absolutely got to be obsessed with the problem, not the solution that you've come up with. Further down the track, a lot of startups forget to think about their go-to-market strategy. They get really focused on like, yes, I found the problem. I think I've got an idea. How do I make it a reality? And they don't think about, can I get this to people? Are people going to be willing to pay for this? And so not testing that early enough, you know, spending all your money, all your thinking into building your thing without having tested earlier, how am I going to get it to people? How much are people willing to pay for it? I think that's a huge mistake that people make. You really need to understand that building a startup is all about little tests that you can do, learn from, and then do the next bit. You know, if you've left something without understanding any feedback for a significant period of time, you've likely made 4 mistakes in that period of time. So it's constantly, can I break this down into a smaller chunk, get feedback, and then decide if I'm still on the right path and if I should still keep going down that path.
That's great advice. Thank you so much. I've got another 3 more questions that I'll open up to all of you. But starting with Nick, what skills and personal attributes make for a successful startup or entrepreneur?
Yeah, my viewpoint would be, you know, the startup journey is such a difficult journey. And I think the #1 skill and trait that you need to have getting into it is resilience. The ability to not give up when times get tough, because they are going to get tough. There's going to be times where you're working, you know, 12, 15-hour days with no reward. You know, you're not going to be getting anything for so much time. There's going to be so many sacrifices that you're going to make. You know, there's going to be so many opportunities that might come your way, especially, you know, as university students that are quite high skilled, you know, can get a degree that could probably pay you a decent salary, but you're saying no to it because you want to be able to fuel this dream. So really just that mentality of being able to keep going, keep pushing through is probably one of the most important skills, because, you know, businesses don't become successful in like a year. They take so much time to be able to do. And if you're committed to the process, you're committed to the journey, and you have that resilient mindset, then that's what's going to make you a successful entrepreneur.
Thanks, Nick. Brad, can I ask you the same question? What skills and personal attributes make for a successful startup entrepreneur?
Yeah, well, apart from resilience, I think you have to be just curious. I mentioned that before. And again, you think most people are, but a lot of people just seem to drift through life sort of in some sort of daze. So even if you realize that curiosity is a secret sauce in terms of the lean canvas, I think that's a huge advantage. And that means just asking questions. If someone says, I had a bad day at work, it's like, oh, that's a shame. No, why did you have a bad day at work? So that constant questioning and diving into sort of rabbit holes. Action oriented, again, when if you can read what I've said down there, when in doubt, do something. Often you sort of have so many choices, like, oh God, which one do I do? Just do something. There's a concept of failing fast, and that sounds like, oh my God, failing fast. It's like, well, what's the option is failing slowly, which I can relate to Nick's sort of cash flow horrors. Been there, done that before. So the idea of just trying things and testing it, as Aggie was saying as well, did that work? No, it didn't work. Okay, let's try something else. So I think action and being constantly curious. And the last one is learn from other people's mistakes if you can. So rather than your own. So listen to all the stories that everyone has been talking about here, and sort of think, what? Okay, I bet what is cash flow? Probably some of you I don't even know what that is. Find out what cash flow is, because it's important.
Thanks, Brad. That's amazing. Janaki, if you could just give some insight into skills and personal attributes that make up a successful startup entrepreneur.
Yes, I had about 4 or 5 points. Planning and strategizing at the outset is of utmost importance. You have to put it down on paper. Have your business plan and your marketing plan. Is it digital marketing? Or like Aggie was saying, what kind of channel are you going to use? What's your target audience? Put all that down, put all your thinking, spend enough time doing that, get feedback from people who have been there, done it, innovative ideas, put it all together, take your time and try and stick to the plan. Sometimes you have to be agile to change. Market conditions like COVID can change things. Floods can change, look what's happening to us. So you have to be agile, but if you have your broad plan and your ambition set, you should survive, right? Sometimes you can't, but have your risk management plan included. If it doesn't work, what are you going to do? So it's not only your business plan, there are so many elements of it. Again, all of this technical stuff is available. Macquarie Uni students, you would have been well tuned into this if you did any kind of business studies. So do the textbook stuff properly on paper. And resilience, like most of you have already said, you have to hang in there in good times, rejoice, bad times, hang in there. Don't struggle alone. That's the third point. Share, collaborate, network, talk to people. You cannot be ashamed of failure. Failures are the pillars of success, right? We all know that. So look to see if the signs are there, try to get in and try to attack the issue then and there. If not, well, it happens to everyone. Talk about it and see how well you can get out of it. And finally, passion. So if you have the passion and you have the resilience, you have the plan, you know where you want to go. It's like Google Maps. You can make mistakes. The map is not going to shout at you. It will put you on the correct path, right? So think of that. You have your target. You'll finally get there if you hang in there.
Great, that's great. Thank you so much, Janaki and everyone. Aggie, do you have any other things to add to that before we move on to the next question?
Yeah, look, I think to what, Brad and Nick were saying, it is about that resilience. But for me, it's about you have to have a personality that doesn't require external motivation. So you need to be someone who can execute, and not feel good about any of that, not get to see a result, not have your boss tell you you're doing a good job, not have someone pat you on the back. If you're not at a stage where you're able to keep executing without external motivation, you're probably not ready for that. The other thing that you really need is you need to be curious, but open to learning. You need to be willing to learn stuff that might not come to you naturally. So the finances are a great example, and I see so many startups fall down there. You don't like finances, you don't get them, you don't understand accounting. you need to force yourself to learn enough basics to understand how to run a business. Because you're at an early stage, you're not going to be able to, like, hopefully you'll be able to have an accountant you speak to a couple of times a year who helps you with your business taxes, but you need to understand how to run aspects of your business so that you are responsible for your business. You have to be responsible for it. And down the track, you might get to hire people, but you still need to know what you're hiring them to do. And you always have to have that accountability and responsibility. So be open to learning and you know, really dig into the areas you're uncomfortable with.
Great, thank you so much for that, Aggie. Look, we've only got a couple of more questions left. I'll start off with Nick. Is there a good age or start to or stage to commence a startup?
I don't want to limit people by saying there's a good age. I think that I wouldn't say that there's any age that you would need to be. I mean, as long as you've got, you know, consent, you've got, oh, you're not like, you know, I've even heard stories of people that have like started businesses at like 12, you know, and have been successful businesses. So I think to me, it comes down is if you've got the traits that we were discussing earlier at any point, then go for it. You know, there's so many opportunities, there's so many problems that we need solving. A lot of the world needs a lot more entrepreneurs with resilient minds, curious minds, and action takers that are passionate about what they're doing. So I feel if you resonate with that at 14, you know, go for it. If you resonate with that at 8 years old, you know, ask your dad and then go for it. You know, like I think that those are some of the steps that you will need to take. So any age I feel is reasonable.
Great, thanks, Nick. I guess I probably should have started with, is it preferable to get workplace experience first? And if so, what type of experience is desirable?
Did you want me to answer that again?
Look, Nick, yes, if you can, or if you'd like to, I'll ask this, get the other panelists to also address that. Yeah,
for sure. Well, I'll keep mine short. I think that if you already know what industry or what problem you want to solve, then getting experience in there is fantastic. So for me, my problem was within mental health. Fortunately for me, I work in the space when I'm dealing with patients that are acutely unwell. So use it as an opportunity to understand the industry, understand the services, understand the problems are fantastic. If you're somebody that doesn't know what you want to do yet, then for me, I would highly encourage getting into a sales role, because I think sales teach you so much, which you can implement into your life. You know, it teaches you how to communicate. It teaches you how to empathize. It teaches you how to ask better questions to be able to understand their needs. So I think that a lot of successful businesses that have their sales experience, and that can be anything, that can be door-to-door sales, that can be over-the-phone sales, that could be, you know, commission-based sales, like so many things that you can do. If you don't know, you know, learn how to sell. I think that's really, really important.
Thanks, Nick, for that. I'll ask Brad too. Is it preferable to get workplace experience first before you commence a startup?
Well, my background is so varied, so my response is probably clouded by that. Just do as many different weird things as you possibly can. So my first sales experience was going to pubs in England with a cassette and a picture of the band saying, hey, can we play tonight or tomorrow night? And you know, we'll do it for free for a couple of years or something. So literally I found myself having to learn how to sell stuff at a very tender age. So basically just try as many different things as possible. Go down, again, rabbit holes. I just want to also add two things that we've spoken about but not really covered is team. So yes, you're on your own maybe, but finding another partner to actually do this with you is vital. So in your weird jobs and you know, networking and stuff, always be looking out for someone who's on that same page with you. But maybe if you're a technical person, they're a salesperson, or the other way around. And on Aggie's thing about learning, if you're not a technical person, there's so many tools out there like bubble.io and stuff. You can just build stuff for yourself. You don't have to go, oh, I'll need to hire a developer. No, just that. So there's a whole bunch of random stuff, but just do as much weird stuff as possible. Don't do boring, well, don't do dull stuff. Do interesting, boring jobs.
Great, thanks for that, Brad. Look, I'm aware of time, so I'll actually move on to the last question and start with Janaki and Aggie. So the final question is there anything else that aspiring entrepreneurs should be aware of when considering that starting their businesses, and any final tips or advice? So Janaki, just a few minutes with you.
Yep. So work experience is not the only way you can get experience. Community projects There are so many things you could do out there. It throws you in the deep end. You have to come up with solutions to address issues, like hit the ground running with coming up with your own solutions. But the good thing is you're learning to work with a team. Very often these projects are in groups. So you learn to handle people, you learn to handle teams, you learn to achieve targets, you learn to work with the unpredictable. So I think community projects and personal experience when I was a teenager, or a little later, I think, early 20s, I was with the Rotaract movement, which is part of the Rotary. And those community service projects and being a committee member in various committees gave me responsibility. I was accountable. So at a young age, I learned accountability. So whether it's in your school or high school or a university, wherever you have done any projects, any skills you learned, take those in as skills. Don't say I'm not experienced. Put it on paper, and you would know and realize that you have a lot more to offer, and then keep expanding, constant learning.
Thanks, Tanaki. Aggie, finally, if you'd like to comment on, is there anything else aspiring entrepreneurs should be aware of when considering starting a business?
It's going to be a lot harder than you think it is, but it is worth it. The payoffs are incredible, but you need to get into it with the right mindset, and you need to understand that it is going to be really hard work. And on that point about experience, it's not about whether you've had a job or a series of jobs before you start doing this. It's about what you do with every opportunity you're given. And I'm sure everyone at some stage has had some jobs, whether it's working at Macca's or in retail or whatever jobs that you're doing sort of to support yourself even now. Those jobs are providing you with a wealth of experience. But I do remember that sometimes, like in your 20s, they're just boring. You just want to get out of there. You don't want to do it. And you don't think that, some of your jobs are really easy. You don't feel like these are skills you need to learn or expand on. But you can see the opportunity in what you're doing right now. And the people that I've worked with who have struggled are those who haven't really had jobs in the real world and haven't learned the skills of having to work with people you might not get along with, you might not like, who might not agree with you. So use every opportunity you can to learn the skills that you will need in running any business.
Thank you so much for that, Aggie. And thank you so much, panel. We have about 6 minutes left. I've learned so much just listening to you all, and I really do think that it's been a valuable session for our viewers as well. Vicky, I'll hand back to you, and also if we've got time to open up for some questions from the audience.
Thanks, Sue. Am I screen sharing now?
Yes.
Yeah. So nothing has appeared in the chat, but if anyone has some final quick questions that they would like to address anyone in the panel, please do so now.
Feel free to speak aloud and just ask your questions.
Yes, you can just speak from the floor.
Brad's raring to answer a question.
I think I saw a question there from Ricardo, who was asking how to find a problem to solve, which I might start off by addressing, and then I can pass it on to any of the panelists to be able to expand on that. I think that the biggest exercise to be able to find a problem to solve is through customer discovery. So to be able to engage and speak with people and understand what their problems are. And that can be in regards to anything, that could be, when you hear people complain all the time, it's like, oh, my straightener takes 5 minutes to load before I can actually start straightening my hair. It's like, okay, well, maybe if you hear that continuously enough, you could be like, okay, well, maybe a solution is to be able to drop that down to 3 minutes or 2 minutes. I think that the key thing is to be able to be curious and ask people questions and get really, really good at interviewing, even random people. And I know that one of the biggest hurdles as an entrepreneur is to have that confidence to be able to go out and, get rejection and get people that tell you, oh, I don't want to speak to you. But those are just some of the things that you need to persevere through. And I think that by speaking to a lot of people, that's where you'll be able to find a solution to a problem.
Thanks, Nick, for addressing that question.
If I may add to that, Susan, Nick's point taken, you should also have the relevant skills to address that problem. So it's like a matching concept. How best can you solve the problem? Are you the best person? What kind of competition is out there? How can you stand alone, make money out of this because you're a business, as well as can you cater to that need well and truly?
Thanks, Tanaki. Look, that wraps up the session for today. But Vicky, is there anything that you would like to, in terms of the slides, to finish off with? But again, a huge thanks to our panelists, Janaki, Nick, Aggie and Brad.
Thanks, Sue. My thanks as well to a fantastic panel. I've been jotting down notes and I've just found the whole thing very inspiring and a great learning curve for everyone, I'm sure. We just wanted to mention a couple of offerings that Macquarie University has for all budding entrepreneurs. Most of you would be familiar with the incubator, which is our startup premises and location that supports startups at 8 Haddonfield Avenue on campus. And I think you can see the slide that I'm running now with the programs that are coming up at the incubator. So we will send these slides out to everyone who is present today. So don't feel that you're going to miss these links. You will have the slides as a resource after we finish up today. But do consider signing up for some of the programs and fantastic opportunities that the incubator will provide. And another thing that I wanted to mention is that one of the student societies on campus is the Entrepreneur Club, and they welcome all Macquarie students. So there are contact details there for how to get involved and sign up for the Entrepreneur Club. And in addition to those two things, please do keep in mind what the panelists mentioned, the Lean Canvas that Brad has mentioned, and Venture Cafe Sydney that I think Janaki referred to. Both great support systems and ways to learn more before you launch into your own startup. In terms of careers, we have lots of resources and information available for you to do with your career generally, not necessarily just for startups. So please do visit Employability Connect to find out about all the workshops, resumes, get advice on all aspects of your career. You can connect with us on LinkedIn or you can email us at careers@mq.edu.au for any other information about how to get in contact with us. And we're very excited that just last week we launched our own Employability Connect Facebook page. So lots of information on there as well. So do visit regularly. And a reminder that we're just at the very start of Careers and Employability Week. And here is our timetable for all the fantastic events that we have coming up between now and Friday. And we hope to see you coming along and taking advantage of all these wonderful offerings. You can book in for all of these workshops via Employability Connect. Also a reminder about the Big Meet Careers Fair, which is coming up on the 24th of March. This is a face-to-face event at the International Convention Centre in Sydney, and Macquarie will have a stand there. So that's another great way to find out a lot more about what's going on and what opportunities are out there for you once you finish your degrees. So again, thank you everyone for joining us, and a special thank you to our wonderful panelists. And that brings us to the end of today's session. All the best for all your endeavours. If you're thinking of getting into a startup of your own, all the best, and bye for now.
Bye-bye.